thank you all. Bruce sort of mentioned it, and it's kind of the elephant in the room, I suppose. As I walked in, everybody said, "Where's Bruce? Where's Bruce? Where's Bruce?" So since it is the elephant in the room, I will tell you what I posted on my blog. His spokesperson, Akeem Bergman, said he had a prior commitment and just could not make this candidate for him, this particular one, but he does plan on participating in the KET debates and some of the other debates with these two gentlemen and perhaps some other Democratic candidates from around the state. So where is Bruce specifically? I don't know, but he's not here. He's doing other campaigning, apparently according to his spokesperson. So here's the way we're going to do this tonight. We're going to give each candidate a 2-minute opening statement, and they can introduce themselves to you all that don't know them. Hopefully that's what they'll do. They'll get 2 minutes to close as well. And in between, I'll be asking them questions about issues affecting the United States Senate, this country, and the folks in Louisville, Kentucky, and the citizens of Kentucky. So we'll give them each a minute to respond, and it's going to be a little free-flowing. It's not going to be one of those stiff little debates where, you know, this guy gets so much time and then the other guy gets so much time to respond. If they don't answer the question, I'm going to ask it again and get them, pry some information out of them. So it should be a little more free-flowing than your average debate. So we hope to keep it going. Hope it's a little lively. Hope you don't sit there bored. But I hope you'll learn something about these candidates, one of whom may be facing Mitch McConnell this fall. All right. We did a coin flip. Michael Cassaro won, and he wanted to go first with his opening statement. So, Mr. Cassaro, you've got 2 minutes.
Well, I'm Mike Cassaro, and I'd like to say that I'm very pleased to be here. I'm very pleased to have this opportunity. First thing I must do is address the events at Ford Motor Company last week. We heard that 800 jobs are going to be cut. That's an entire shift gone by next summer. That means 800 more families from this community that are going to be struggling to stay on their feet. Even with a buyout, that just gives them a little more time. It doesn't change the eventual outcome. This is one of the many challenges that we face here in this country because of failed economic policies of George Bush, failed economic policy of Mitch McConnell, who votes for everything that George Bush wants. We have an inept economic policy that exports our prosperity right along with our jobs. And for every job that leaves this country, that not only leaves a person here that doesn't have a job, but all of those payroll taxes and Social Security taxes that would have been generated, they're gone too. And that leaves us having to borrow in order to meet the obligations that we have to our own citizens here at home. And we also have an inept economic policy, or inept energy policy, that has gasoline prices soaring at the same time that the oil companies are recording record high profits. We have no alternative plans for energy. That leaves those of us at the pump to pay the tab. And because of this recession that is denied by George Bush and Mitch McConnell,
Yep, your time's up, Mr. Cassaro. That's the timer right there. That was 2 minutes.
2 minutes.
Want to say anything to close? 10 seconds.
Let's just say, as your United States Senator, I'll be working diligently with the Democratic colleagues in Washington to help face these challenges.
Okay, very good. Thank you. You can applaud. It's okay. Gregg Fischer, 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mark. First, thanks to you, Mark, for hosting tonight, Metro Dems, and everybody coming out tonight. A little bit about me to start with. I'm a lifelong Kentuckian. I was born here in 1958. After working my way through college, came back to Louisville and started a company called Servend with a few other folks. And after a couple tough years, like most small businesses had, at the age of 25, I invented the combination ice and beverage dispenser that, along with a fellow named Jerry Landers, that you see everywhere. So I'm like one of these real Americans that invented a real product and really made it in a factory here in the United States and had a lot of export success with that as well. Servend, we built that through 1997, acclaimed throughout the world as a great company. We won the USA Today Quality Cup. I've been involved with the creation of thousands of American jobs in probably 20 different companies or so, so I know a lot about jobs and job creation. My community focus has been on education and children. Like a lot of you all, I believe that education is the pathway to opportunity, and we have to do everything we possibly can to make sure education is available for everybody. Most important thing to me is my family. I'm married to Alexandra Gerasimides, a good Greek lady, and I have 4 teenage kids, so running for the United States Senate is very easy compared to raising 4 teenagers. And it's also taught me a lot about consensus building and bringing people together, so good training for the Senate. Because we need a lot of things to get done in the Senate right now. We're facing big problems as a country. Number one, I call the assault on the pocketbooks of working Americans. Healthcare is a big problem with that. Energy is a big problem with that. The money we're spending in Iraq is a big problem with that. So all these things are contributing right now to what I call and what I see as the gutting of the middle class of America. And if there was ever a time to be outraged about what's going on in the United States right now and saying we've gone too far to the right, it's now. And so are we going to... So the question, I think, for all of us is, are we going to stand by and act like we're powerless, or are we going to engage ourselves in the democratic process and stand up this November, send Mitch McConnell home, and get this seat back in Democratic hands? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, now we'll get into the question and answer portion of this thing. And since both of you, I've just got a list of questions here. I'll just kind of roam around on my page here. Since both of you talked about the economy briefly, Gregg, this is a question that will go to you first. I think most Americans, at least by polling numbers, are most concerned right now about the economy. Yeah. Does a U.S. Senator really play any role in the economy and job creation in this country? And if so, what would you do as U.S. Senator?
Great. Well, one of the things I've been saying is when you take a look at the results of our current United States Senator, Mitch McConnell, if he works for any of my companies, he would have been fired a long time ago. So people say Mitch has got all this power. The question is, has he used it? He really hasn't helped 99% of Kentuckians. But no, I look at the United States Senate as an area that can really help. We're at a historical inflection point right now. We're after 9/11. We're in an internationalized world. We have globalized trade. We have emerging economies of India, Russia, and China. And most folks I talk to have lost confidence on where their skills fit in this world right now. After World War II, after the Depression, the government stepped back and said, how are we going to help people transition through this economy? So I believe the President should do that. I believe the Senate should do that. And as United States Senator, I would help craft this type of plan so we get new skills for the 21st century.
Mr. Cassaro, 1 minute.
The reason we've lost jobs in this country is the failed economic policy of George Bush and Mitch McConnell, who supports George Bush's economic policy. We need to do 2 things. We need to bring jobs back to this country, and we need to create new jobs here. First, we have to realize that when companies move overseas to do their manufacturing, only part of it is the excuse that there's decreased cost of labor. The other part is they're evading taxes here in this country, payroll taxes that are needed to support this country to pay their obligations here. As your United States Senator, I will work to change the laws regarding most favored nation trading status and free trade to bring jobs back, and I will support legislation to create an environment for small businesses to manufacture in this country.
Well, let's do a follow-up here. Let's stay on the subject here of jobs. Would you support putting tariffs on goods coming into this country from China, Mexico, other places?
Well, let's say that as far as most favored nation trading status goes, which is trade with countries like China, that status, most favored nation trading status, should only be granted to countries that treat their labor force the same way that we treat ours, comparable to what we have here.
So who would you give most favored nation status to? Give me a couple countries.
Well, most of Western Europe.
Okay. Gregg, same question. Tariffs?
Well, tariffs are in effect taxes. Now, the issue to me is the enforcement of the trade policies that we have. You know, you can take a look at China, for instance, and what they've done with our software piracy is wrong. So we need to enforce the trade agreements that we have, make sure they're both, you know, free trade but fair trade as well.
Would either of you repeal NAFTA? 1 minute, starting with, who did I start with? Michael.
Absolutely. If I had been in the Senate when it was passed, I would have voted no way. This is not a partisan issue. We had Jesse Jackson on the left and Pat Buchanan on the right, both adamantly opposed to NAFTA because NAFTA is bad for America and bad for Americans. It needs to be repealed. If I'm in the U.S. Senate, I will work hard to see that legislation is promoted that at least renegotiates, if not repeals, NAFTA.
Gregg Fischer.
I would reopen NAFTA. We do live in an international world right now, and I think to deny that is naive. But these trade agreements need to be fair. I bought a building 5 years ago with a partner that was the home of Louisville Ladder. 300 good jobs there. They moved to Mexico. I don't believe that when NAFTA was passed 14 years ago, they envisioned that at all. So the issue I have with trade agreements is there needs to be periodic review. The unintended consequences of NAFTA have really crippled a large part of our economy. That's the issue that needs to be addressed. Trade can lift all boats if we do it properly. But right now the issue is a lot of people are being damaged, and that's what needs to be addressed.
Does your company, and I have no idea, does your company sell products to Mexico and Canada in those countries?
Yes.
So if there was a repeal of NAFTA, would it impact sales from your companies?
Well, I'm not suggesting that we repeal NAFTA, but
Well, he is. That's why I'm asking.
well, we've got to look at both ways. For instance, a lot of the energy of our country comes from Canada, you know, and it comes in duty-free. So we have an energy problem as well. So, you know, that's why I don't think we need to repeal NAFTA. We need to take a look at what's working, what's not working, and work on the things that we need to improve.
Mr. Cassaro, there are those who would say by repealing NAFTA, you're essentially sticking your head in the sand and not realizing this is a global economy. What would you say to folks?
Well, I would say that in this country, we essentially have 50 states with the same thing as a free trade agreement between all 50 states. Where the jobs go matters. And you can demonstrate that by an experience right here in the local area. A few decades ago, when the Bat Company moved from Louisville across the river to Clarksville, the city of Louisville and the state of Kentucky lost something. They lost some prosperity, and Clarksville gained it. A couple of decades later, when the Bat Company moved back, the prosperity and the benefit moved back to Louisville, and Clarksville suffered a loss. The prosperity follows the jobs. Where the jobs are located is what matters.
Okay. I'm told, can all of you in the back of the room hear okay? Can everybody hear okay? Okay, good. Told to tell you guys, make sure you speak right into the microphones. Well, let's talk about something that's a domestic issue. It's been in the newspapers, it's been in the media the past couple of weeks. Interrogation techniques. President Bush just vetoed a bill that was passed by Congress that would ban waterboarding and other forms of interrogation techniques. Some folks call them torture. Other folks say they're necessary to get information out of terror suspects and others. I think we're starting with Mr. Fischer. Would you vote to override that veto?
Well, I think the issue with the torture is that there is not persuasive evidence to me that torture really results in any better intelligence. We've got plenty of ways to do this and still maintain the moral high ground of the United States and get the information that we need as a country. I think what we've lost, especially in the last 8 years, is people looking at the United States of America as a beacon of hope and a beacon of morality. We've got to regain that. So when we torture folks in ways that are not humane, we lose that. Additionally, we don't get any better intelligence from that. So I think we need to, when we make these decisions, we need to make these decisions in the long-term interest of our country, and the best thing for the United States of America is when everybody looks at the United States of America as a fair place that they want to be, they want to emulate, and unnecessary torture does not help that image at all.
I assume that's a yes. You'd vote to override the veto.
Yes.
Okay. Michael?
The issue of torture is one of the big points of hypocrisy of the Bush administration and, of course, Mitch McConnell and completely supporting it. We chose to claim the moral high road when we went into Iraq to save the world from weapons of mass destruction. And then at the same time, we're claiming the moral high road. We turn around and take the low road when it comes to interrogation of prisoners. This is hypocrisy. And as your United States Senator, if I'm in a position when it comes up for a vote for overriding a veto, I will vote to override the veto.
See, that's what we like. Nice, clear, concise answers. Yes, no, you know, that's good. Don't waffle on me. While we're on Bush administration policies, wiretapping. Between 2002 and 2004, there were 4,700 applications to a special court for emergency wiretaps placed on U.S. citizens who were not accused but suspected of having done something wrong. Is that okay? Mr. Cassaro? The way the current system is set up, is it okay?
Well, there are current laws in place, and it starts with the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, particularly the Fourth Amendment. As long as the law is followed, I will have less of a problem than I do with the illegal wiretaps that were done by the Bush administration and are still being supported by Mitch McConnell. These illegal wiretaps are not just illegal, they may even rise to the level of being an impeachable offense. The Constitution and the Bill of Rights are the charter under which our government operates. They're operating outside their charter when they get involved in illegal wiretapping. It's up to us, American citizens, to hold them accountable, to make sure that they operate within the law, within their charter to operate. And one of the ways to do that is to vote out of office the violators and get people in there that will follow it. As your senator, I will protect our rights under the Constitution and the Bill of Rights at every opportunity and with every bill that comes across my desk.
All right. Mr. Fischer, hold on a second. I got to follow up. What's illegal? What did the Bush administration authorize in your mind that was illegal? Refresh my memory.
Well, what the Bush administration did that was illegal was they left out that little step of going to the special court and showing that there was probable cause or at least reason to suspect. And I think actually they just skipped that step entirely, and they went directly to the providers of the service and got them to provide the illegal wiretap, skipping the judicial branch altogether.
The FISA court, okay. All right, Mr. Fischer, you've got a minute 30 if you want it to answer that, and I may have a follow-up for you as well.
Very good. No, clearly I believe, I agree with Senator Jay Rockefeller, who heads the Senate Intelligence Committee, that the Bush administration overreached with their wiretapping. We have laws in place in our country already. You can wiretap and get authority for doing that later. So we're a country that has checks and balances in place. There's a balance between government intrusion and civil liberties. So I think we have a good system in place right now. George Bush overstretched. I believe that that our wiretapping system is adequate as it is right now and doesn't need to be expanded.
So is it okay to go to that special court, that secret court, for lack of a better term, to seek approval, or should it be just a case where most police agencies go to U.S. District Court down here in Louisville and get permission from just a regular federal judge to do wiretaps, and that is sealed for some time until something happens? Or should there still be this special court set up?
I'm not convinced that there has to be a special court set up. I mean, let me say that I do agree that there are a lot of people that want to do damage to the United States of America. There are people that use terroristic threats and actions, obviously, against the United States. So this is not an issue where I'm soft on terror, but I think we have to protect the balance that we have within our system right now, and our current system, in my opinion, is fine.
Okay. Let's go back on something a little bit more sort of job related, since we've got some folks from the UAW here. Privatization. This administration, as you know, has attempted to privatize many government services. Taxpayers, I think, would say, well, you know, on one hand, they might be able to do it cheaper than having public employees. On the other hand, do you really want to farm out your government services to private companies? Where do you stand on government privatizing of services? Greg, you go first. A minute.
Thank
Go
you.
ahead.
You know, obviously, nobody likes to pay taxes, right? We pay taxes for government services, but government does a lot of good things, you know, in terms of our roadways, infrastructure, education, et cetera. So whether it's privatization or not, we want to maximize the value that we get from our taxes. And there's plenty of places that we can learn from. Some states have best practices, other countries have best practices, so we can always improve what we're doing right now. You know, relative to privatization, there's been some problems with that. The Walter Reed Army Hospital is a very good example, where we had 300 government employees giving care. Halliburton got the contract. They take it down to 60 employees, and of course we saw the kind of abuse that we had at Walter Reed Army Hospital. Not good. Likewise in Iraq right now, we outsource a lot of our military operations over there to Blackwater and Halliburton as well, at 4 or 5 times the cost. So while Bush and McConnell talk about smaller government, the government's actually gotten a lot bigger underneath of them. So privatization certainly is not the answer to everything.
Is there a situation where private companies taking over government services might be a good thing?
Well, I don't think you can categorically say it's always evil, and there's a balance of where we can get the best value for taxpayers' money, and I think the taxpayers deserve the best value for their money, but it's not always a black and white issue, as you said.
Mr. Cassaro, same question. Privatization of government jobs.
Privatization of government jobs is another big point of hypocrisy of the Bush administration. And once again, Mitch McConnell is right there along with him. At the same time that they're talking about privatizing things, they took over the Transportation Safety Administration, the largest government power takeover in history of a private industry, and didn't add anything to security. But the big thing is we have a Constitution, and under that Constitution there are government powers that must never be privatized. We must never privatize our military. We must never privatize regulation of our economy. We must never privatize our courts. We should never privatize education, and we should never privatize Social Security. Other functions that are non-governmental functions that the government has taken over may be appropriately privatized. But Transportation Safety Administration needs to be returned to the private sector, and the entire Patriot Act needs to be repealed.
So the entire Patriot Act needs to be repealed. All of it?
All of it. The whole thing is a violation of our civil liberties.
Mr. Fischer, you want to respond to that?
Well, I think, you know, like many things in government life, it's a balance. So I'm not ready to say the entire Patriot Act needs to be repealed. We need to take a look at what's working and what's not working, and then evaluate it from there.
Well, a lot of these wiretaps we talked about earlier, some of that came through the Patriot Act, some of it. Some might say we can't fight terrorism in this country or outside this country and moving into this country without some sort of broader government ability to interrogate suspects, to wiretap, to have more freedom to investigate. Mr. Cassaro, what would you say to the folks that say that? I'm sure that's what Mitch McConnell's going to say, so if you can run it against him, you better get used to that question.
Those that sacrifice liberty for security end up with neither.
Go ahead, Greg, if you want to give it another shot.
Well, again, to me, it's a balance that you know, we've got to be tough on terror, so to speak, but we also have to have our civil liberties intact. We talked about the illegal wiretapping. That was an overstretch in my mind. So I'm not ready to say categorically we've got to throw out the baby with the bathwater here.
Okay. All right. I know there's a lot of you out there that are interested in Iraq, so we'll get to it. Okay? There are those who say we should have a timetable for getting the overwhelming majority of our troops out of Iraq. Do you favor a timetable for getting out of Iraq? I think, Gregg, you're first.
4,000 American dead, $500 billion spent, $120 billion a year. You know, we've been in Iraq longer than we've been in World War II. We're refereeing a civil war in Iraq. Our troops have done everything we've asked them to do. In my mind, we need to bring them home now. We need to bring them home safely. You know, every day that goes on where our troops are on the streets of Iraq, we see what happens. Earlier this week, 5 more soldiers killed. They're walking targets on the streets. I don't know what more our troops can do. We need to give our generals a timeline and a budget and say, bring home our troops safely.
Mr. Cassaro?
We need to bring the troops home from Iraq. The recent economic data from Iraq shows that their oil industry is back online to the extent that at the current oil prices, they're making a lot of money. They're making enough money that now where they can afford to begin to pay the cost of their own security and their own reconstruction. What we need to do is, now that that is occurring, as your United States Senator, I will promote legislation starting in January of 2009. I'll support the legislation that calls for bringing the troops home and have the Iraqis, with the help of the Iraqi security forces and our allies in Iraq, to provide their own security and reconstruction.
Let's suppose that John McCain is elected the next president of the United States. Yeah, I knew I'd get that right. But let's suppose. He has said we need to stay in Iraq until the situation is safe, till the entire country is stabilized. Could be years and years. Could be another situation where, like South Korea, for instance. Would you, as a U.S. Senator, keep voting to reauthorize spending for whatever troops are in Iraq if the president says, I want to stay there and I'm the commander-in-chief and I'm going to keep them there? Or would you make the tough vote, much tougher vote, to suspend reauthorizing the money for the war in Iraq? Forget who's first. Michael, I think.
I believe that what John McCain actually said was we need to stay there for 100 years.
Well, he said that once, but I haven't heard him say it again.
Once was enough. As a United States Senator, I will support legislation, vote for legislation, to start bringing the troops home by means of reducing the funding starting in January 2009 and ratchet back the Defense Department funding at an escalating rate until it's no longer feasible for the Commander-in-Chief to keep troops in Iraq.
It's pretty clear. Gregg Fischer?
To me, our generals are very capable of carrying out any order that we ask them to do. Obviously, it takes money to operate a war, too much money in our case here with Iraq. And to me, it's a matter of you have X amount of dollars, and we need to get out of Iraq safely. So if that means voting against the next president of the United States, I would do that.
So just to be clear, you would vote not to reauthorize full fund, whatever the president asked for in terms of funding for Iraq. If President McCain comes up and says, Senator Fischer, I want you to vote to reauthorize full spending for Iraq. We can't pull the troops out right now. I want you to keep funding this war at the present pace. And Congress says, no, we got a bill that would do exactly the opposite and would draw down the spending and draw down the troops. You would do what?
Yeah, the open-ended nature of the budget has been the problem. You know, so we do need to say, stop. Enough's enough.
Okay. Global warming. Would either one of you support federal subsidies for coal to liquid technology or coal to natural gas plants? Mr. Fischer?
Well, global warming is obviously scientifically proven. I think about 95% of the country agrees with that right now. So that is the most imminent threat to our entire planet. You know, if we don't have a planet, we don't have to worry about anything else. We do have an opportunity here in Kentucky, where we're sitting on one of the world's largest coal reserves, to create good jobs, but we have challenges with that as well. You know, how do we actually, in fact, get to this so-called clean coal technology? It's not been proven that we can do that. Scientists think we can. Obviously, it would be a wonderful thing for Kentucky if we could do that. When you take a look at coal to liquids, coal to natural gas, it sounds great. You know, if we can technologically achieve it, it's a wonderful thing. So we should put research dollars to that, but we also need to be realistic that we've got to get off, you know, we've got to reduce our energy use here in the country. We use about 5 times more energy as Americans as Europeans, for example. This is the root of the problem. So energy efficiency reduces cost, it decreases pollutants, so it's a good practice no matter what. But we should try to invest and make Kentucky a center for the optimal use of coal if we can do it in an environmentally responsible way.
All right. Michael Cassaro.
As far as coal liquefaction or coal gasification goes, these processes do work. They were invented by the Germans in World War II under dire economic conditions. The problem is that they're not a solution to global warming. Alternative fuel technology is the solution to global warming. And if we could invest money in things like fusion and hydrogen cell technology, that would go a long way towards helping the problem with global warming. As your United States Senator, what I would do is make sure that the law is followed, make sure that the laws are in place first, that mountaintop removal, coal mining, coal liquefaction, and coal gasification, when they proceed, are done according to the law in an environmentally friendly way so that it's minimal impact on Kentucky. Now, if that can't be done in an economically feasible way, we need to invest in other technology that is economically feasible.
Right now, kind of along the same line, right now, Kentucky has a law which bars the building of any new nuclear power plants unless there is a way to dispose of the nuclear waste out of those plants, basically making it impossible for anybody to build a nuclear power plant in Kentucky. Should that state law be lifted, or should the federal government superimpose it or impose its power on the state of Kentucky and other states and say, sorry, you can't restrict nuclear power plant construction? Mr. Fischer?
Well, there's some recent action on that in our state Senate, as you saw, and there was very little debate. Actually, it passed in terms of relooking at the use of nuclear energy. Nuclear energy is being used very safely throughout many parts of the world, and we need to take a look at our full energy portfolio in the United States if we're going to get off our addiction to oil, get cleaner energy as well. So nuclear is one of the options to take a look at. Obviously, nuclear waste is the big issue. But we do a lot of work with nuclear-related issues already in Kentucky, out in the western part of the state. So it's, to me, for us to have a responsible environmental policy or energy policy, we need to be looking at all of our options from nuclear to solar to wind so that we have a full breadth of opportunities. The challenge to the energy companies is they can't cost justify building any new plants right now because there's an uncertain future on what the requirements are going to be for their energy plants. And that needs to be cleaned up one way or the other.
Okay. Mr. Cassaro?
The nuclear power generation is actually a good thing as far as global warming goes. But the waste that is generated by the nuclear power industry using fission nuclear technology is among the most dangerous substances on the planet. There has never been any feasible way developed to dispose safely of that material. If we invest in research for fusion. That's a very clean nuclear power generation. And this is within reach. We know that cold fusion is a reality. We just have to find a way of doing it in a commercially feasible way. We know that hot fusion works, but we have to find a way to contain the reaction. Those are just research hurdles, and we need to tackle those with the same type of economic vigor that we attacked the war in Iraq.
So I think I'm hearing you say, well, let me put words in your mouth here. I think I'm hearing you say you oppose Kentucky building or any place else building any more nuclear power plants that use current nuclear technology. Am I putting words in your mouth, or is that right?
I think that's correct, but I'll restate it. We need to not build any more nuclear power plants that use fission technology. We need to develop fusion as one of the prime alternatives for our energy needs that's environmentally friendly.
Okay. Universal health care. It's been talked about in the presidential race, especially on the Democratic side. There are 47 million uninsured Americans out there who don't have any insurance. There are various plans to give universal or close to universal health care coverage to all Americans. A, do you agree that every American should have a health insurance plan? If you do, how would you pay for it as a U.S. Senator? Michael?
Well, first, whether we're talking about revising the current healthcare system or jumping to a universal healthcare system, what we have to look at is why aren't we getting our money's worth, and are we going to get our money's worth in the future? Currently, on a per capita basis, we pay more for our healthcare than the next two countries in the world combined. And according to the World Health Organization, we're ranked 37th in the world on our outcomes. I'm in this industry. I've been a practicing physician for over 20 years. I see the shenanigans that goes on that diverts money away from patient care and towards enormous bonuses for insurance company executives and other places that have no impact on taking care of the people that need it. That's where our efforts need to be focused, redirecting the funds in the system to the patient care.
I'm going to come back to you in a minute. Mr. Fischer, why don't you go ahead and answer that question about universal health care, and I got a bunch of follow-ups probably for both of you.
Right, okay. Well, universal health care, let me be direct. Yes, I'm for it, okay?
How do you pay for it?
Well, we spend $2.2 trillion a year on health care in America. It's a big number, isn't it? It's bigger than the entire gross domestic product of China. Okay, $7,500 per person. So my friends in the healthcare industry say, an outbreak of common sense, we'll get 30% cost reduction. So we have a lot of uninsured in America, 47 million, as you said. That's 15% of the country. Do you think we could get 15% efficiency out of our healthcare system? How many of you all go to the doctor, and what's the first thing they do? They shove that white piece of paper that's been like Xeroxed 5,000 times at you and say, would you fill this out? And you say, isn't this the same thing I just filled out like 2 days ago? Yes, but we got to fill it out again. So what $2 trillion business do we know that still operates on paper? So electronic health records would be one way to modernize the system. My point is there's more than enough money in the system to take care of all Americans. And to me, this is a gut check time decision for Americans to see how the people with power decide to treat the people that are powerless. Because this is inordinately a burden on the poor people and the middle class of our country. And we as Americans have got to say enough to this and get good quality health care for everybody.
I'm going to be fair and go back to Mr. Cassaro, then I got to follow up for Gregg. I'm going to get behind myself here. You're basically placing the blame on the insurance companies, saying the fat cats in the insurance companies are costing way too much money, and if we do what to insurance companies, we'll have plenty of money to insure Americans.
Well, it's more than just the insurance companies. There's a wide range of problems here. It starts right with the economic policies of the Bush administration, the people that are appointed to government agencies like the FDA, FDA actually promotes illness through some of its policies that directs more business to the pharmaceutical industries and increases our healthcare needs by making us sicker. That's one thing we can do without in order to reduce our healthcare costs. It's not just insurance companies. It's also for-profit hospital companies. It's also all of the administrative burdens, the regulatory burdens that are put on the healthcare system by the government. Like Mr. Fischer pointed out, we've got technology and business in the rest of the world moving this way, and the healthcare system is becoming more and more labor intensive and less efficient as time goes, and it's the regulatory burden that's forcing that.
Do you believe that every American has a right to either free or really, really cheap health insurance that they can afford?
I believe that we need to make health care available to every American. The choice of whether or not to buy an insurance policy is a matter of personal choice. But what I do think is we need to have a safety net, a bare bones safety net, not an all resources, no holds barred safety net, but a bare minimum safety net for people that either through circumstances beyond their control end up with health care needs far beyond the coverage of their policy, or if they've chosen to have no policy and end up in situation where they need minimum safety net, that needs to be provided.
All right. Mr. Fischer, you said you think there's enough basically waste in the system to come up with the money. Now, as a reporter in Frankfurt, I've heard, I don't know how many gubernatorial candidates say, we're going to get rid of all the waste, fraud, and abuse, and we're going to save a ton of money, and we're going to have plenty of money hanging around to do all this stuff. Convince me that there's, say, the estimates are $110 billion is what it would take to cover all these people that don't have insurance now. Convince me that there's $110 billion in either the federal government or in the healthcare system, the combination of the two, to pay for those folks.
Well, let's just start with common sense first, and then we'll get into some specific examples. But, I just ask everybody in this room, do you think the delivery of your health care could be improved by 15%? Yeah. When you go to the doctor, you just scratch your head, and it's a bunch of well-meaning people, but the inefficiencies are just obvious for everybody to see. So, one, there's common sense, as I said. Secondly, there needs to be kind of a welling up of outrage here, because there's examples within our health care and Medicare, for instance, where we cannot negotiate drug prices with the pharmaceuticals. That's wrong. Okay, and the VA hospitals have done that very effectively. Our veterans have much lower drug prices than our seniors. You can drive across the border to Canada and get the same drugs for much less price. I mean, this is an indication that our system is broken. It just makes you scratch your head. I'm an outsider. Maybe I don't understand. But I do understand that there's more pharmaceutical lobbyists than there are members of Congress. There's a problem with that.
Well, speaking of pharmaceuticals, do you favor drug reimportation? Just allow it, carte blanche, drug reimportation from Canada?
I think anything that lowers the health care cost for our citizens that's safe needs to be pursued. We need to be focusing on what's best for people, not what's best for some of the special interest or big companies. I'm all for companies making a profit. I'm a business guy. But the question is, how much is enough? So reimportation of drugs is just an example of a bigger problem, and that's the way we approach health care in the country.
Okay. Mr. Cassaro, drug reimportation.
The real question with drug reimportation is why the same drug costs so much more in this country than it does in another country. And for that, we have to look right at the administration. Once again, inept policies of the Bush administration that Mitch McConnell supports that fail to provide the regulatory safety net that we need at a cost-effective manner. The FDA was chartered to protect us from unsafe drugs. The FDA has failed. We just have to look at the deaths and the drug recalls in the last decade to see that. Yet in that failure, they have so escalated the administrative burden and the cost of these drugs that the pharmaceutical companies charge much higher prices in this country to recover that than they do in other countries.
So, was that a yes or no? You favor reimportation?
That's I favor the need for eliminating the need to re-import drugs. Until then, yeah, we'll re-import them. We'll put the FDA and the domestic distribution network a big dent in them. But we have to address the need here for people that it's not economically feasible for them to go to Canada.
Okay. Gregg, you want to touch that one? You want to respond?
Again?
Well, if you want to. I'm just, if you're done, you're done. I just want to know if you want to respond to what he had to say.
No, I think the big issue here is that, you know, the healthcare system in America is just a great example of a system that needs to be transformed. The people in Washington have been there too long. The Washington ways are broken. You know, we spend all this money, but we don't have quality healthcare for all Americans. It's wrong. I mean, this is an area where there's enough money to take care of a problem. Usually the problem is there isn't enough money. But in healthcare, with some good, clean, transformative thinking, I think we can get better healthcare to more Americans.
Okay. Got about, about 8 minutes left, something like that? Okay, so I'll leave enough time for you guys to have your total of 4 minutes to wrap up. A couple of quick questions here. Mitch McConnell was recently named the 7th most influential member of the Senate. Why should Kentuckians vote for a brand new guy to go up to Washington when they've got a guy that is the 7th most powerful man in the Senate? Mr. Fischer?
If you're happy with the way the United States is right now, and if you're happy with the way Kentucky is, vote for Mitch McConnell. If he's our 7th most powerful United States senator, we can do better. You know, the question is, how's Mitch McConnell used his power? When we take a look at the quality of life indicators for Kentuckians, education, health care, the environment, Mitch McConnell's been there for 24 years. Tell me one of our quality of life indicators that's gone the right way. Kentucky's gone from 35th or 40th in the country to 45th or 48th in the country under Mitch McConnell's watch. So, Mark, that's the kind of power we don't need.
Okay. Mr. Cassaro?
Well, there have been some other powerful people in the world, too. Saddam Hussein, Adolf Hitler, Joseph Stalin. I'm not necessarily comparing George Bush and Mitch McConnell to them, but the illustration is that power does not mean the same as power for good. Mitch McConnell may be the 7th most powerful man in the Senate, but he's not a power for good. He's certainly not a power for good in Kentucky. What we need to do is change that, and as your United States Senator, I will be that power for good in the United States Senate for Kentuckians and Americans.
Mr. Cassaro, who would you like to see at the top of the ticket in November of your party, Barack Obama or Hillary Clinton?
Well, first let me say that my candidate, the candidate that I wanted to be at the top of the ticket, is no longer in the race. And
who was that?
That was Richardson. And at this point, if the Kentucky primary is in play, meaning that my vote will mean something in the primary for the first time in my voting career, then I'll have to make a decision between Obama and Clinton. Otherwise, if it's decided before then, if Richardson's still on our ballot, I'll still cast the vote.
But as a candidate, I guess what I'm asking, who would you prefer running with you, Hillary Clinton or Barack Obama? It's my job to put you on the spot.
He's going to knock me off the fence. I haven't made a clear decision but what I can tell you is that an awful lot of the things that Barack Obama says make a whole lot of sense to me.
Okay. I think that's a hint. Gregg Fischer, same question.
Thank you, Mark. I would have been disappointed in you if you didn't ask that question. No, I think the exciting thing here is that regardless of the nominee, we're going to have a female or an African American, a non-white male, okay? And I'm not prejudiced against white males, but I think it's a great day for our country when we can look forward to where America is moving in terms of how we evaluate talent and how we evaluate each other. So I will be delighted if either candidate is at the top of the ticket, Mark. Thank you for the good question, though.
I'm not done. Fence sitter.
That's part of my job description now, too. Okay, you ask the questions, I waffle.
Do you think either one of them would be better for you if you were the nominee?
Well, I mean, clearly Obama has a message of change. That's a message that as I go from Paducah to Ashland and north to south around Kentucky, that's part of my mantra, is that the people in Washington have just been there way too long. I think they've gotten too comfortable. It's kind of a cozy little club up there, whether you're a Democrat or a Republican, if you've been there too long, in my mind. The Constitution was never intended to have lifetime politicians. We see what that's gotten us right now, so I think fresh ideas are good for the country. And I'd hope to bring those fresh ideas as your United States Senator.
I'll take that as I'm not going to answer that question. All right, 2 minutes each. Let's wrap this up. Michael, you go first. You both done an excellent job tonight, by the way. And I'll have some more comments in a second. But Mr. Cassaro, 2 minutes to kind of wrap up what you want to tell these folks, why they should vote for you in May.
I'd like to first thank the Metro Democratic Club for organizing this forum. And I'd like to thank everybody else that came for demonstrating your commitment to good politics. As far as the issues that we've discussed, on a lot of these issues, I've been there. As a small business owner, every day I see more evidence that our economy is in deep trouble. As a practicing physician for over 20 years, I see the shenanigans that goes on that diverts our healthcare dollars away from taking care of people that need it. As an award-winning college educator, I know that we can do a much better job educating our citizens. With these qualifications, I have unique credentials that will allow me to go to the United States Senate Committee on Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions. With those qualifications, and from that committee, as a first-year senator, I can make a difference. I can have significant influence over what comes out of that committee and gets passed into law that has an impact on your unions, your pensions, your health care, and your education for your children and grandchildren. I will beat Mitch McConnell in the fall. I will have the money to beat Mitch McConnell. 2 weeks ago, I hired a new record-setting fundraising director who has hit the ground running. And we are financing this campaign the way campaigns should be financed, with contributions from individuals just like you, and in fact, including some of you. I thank you for this opportunity again, and I respectfully ask for your vote for me on May 20th and November 4th. Thank you.
Mr. Fischer?
Again, thanks everybody for being here. Thanks, Mark. Thanks to the Metro Dems. To me, it starts kind of like with passion. Feeling in someone that you feel like you can trust, somebody that you would be happy to vote for, somebody that you would like to work together to restore some dignity to the United States. As I've traveled throughout Kentucky over these last 6 months, personally, I'm just outraged at what I see in terms of what I call the gutting of the middle class. The middle class is the backbone of our country. And right now, whether it's jobs or health care or energy, it is under attack like never before. And unless all Americans stand up and say we've had enough, it's going to continue. Well, I want to go to Washington, D.C., and I want to fight for that every day. I have not given up on the American dream. I have not given up on a country where hard work can pay off. I have not given up on a country where we get an education, where we get a health care, and we can move ahead. We can have a better future for our kids if we all put our mind to it. Now, come November, we need a clear contrast to Mitch McConnell. We need a candidate that's got a good, clean business record. We need a candidate that has no political baggage in his past. We need to make this tough on Mitch McConnell so the people of Kentucky can have a clear contrast when they decide to cast their vote. Do you want a 20th century politician that's practiced social division and hatred and working against people? Or do you want a 21st century candidate that brings people together, that listens, that acts? I think I can be that contrast to Mitch McConnell, so it's very clear which direction the people of Kentucky want to take the United States Senate. I'd be pleased to walk across the finish line shoulder to shoulder with everybody in this room. So I'd ask you for your support. I thank you for coming tonight, and I look forward to serving you as your next United States Senator. Thank you.
They deserve the applause. I'd like to thank both of you. You really were very candid. You answered the questions generally in a forthright way. And a lot of times, a lot of consultants that come into TV newsrooms and newspapers say that folks are not engaged in politics. I think the showing tonight, there's over 200 people in this room, shows that Americans are engaged, especially this year. Democrats and Republicans are very engaged, and they're not interested in the 5-second sound bites. They're more interested in knowing what the issues are and knowing how the candidates are addressing those issues. So I thank you all for being here tonight and being engaged in the political process. Thank you.
Good job.